and this is Conversations with Damien. And I am Damien Calmette, and we are going to be talking about forgiveness, unforgiveness, forgetting, all sorts of things today. But for a moment, let's just take a deep breath. Let us center ourselves, let us center our mind. Let us come into a place of understanding and ask that God in many names reveal to us what needs to be revealed today. Do you know, a few months ago, I was doing a workshop on inner healing. Yvonne, I'm so glad you're with us today. And in this inner healing workshop, a lady came up to me after one of the sessions and she said, you know, we've all suffered in life, but I like to forgive and forget. And I just looked at her and I said, you know what? I said, that's a bunch of BS. Because if we forget about past wounds, how are we going to avoid the same situation again? I've encountered so many people in my life that struggle to forgive someone. Hey, I've been there. Sometimes I still am. They don't understand the importance of forgiveness completely. Few people have taught of how do we forgive. We all know we need to and want to, but how do we do it? Let me say this to you today. There is no healing without love, and there is no love without forgiveness. If we don't forgive, the cycle of bitterness and revenge continues, and it's often due to the inaccurate view that we have on forgiveness. We see the tip of the iceberg, but as we've been taught so many times, the power underneath that iceberg that we don't even see is what really controls the iceberg. And we may plaster a smile on our face, but if we have bitterness and resentment and unforgiveness inside us, that is going to begin to be part of our emotion and who we are. So forgiving is learning to stop being angry and harboring resentment towards somebody who wronged us or somebody that we perceived wrongness. While forgetting, if we just forget and we just decide we're moving on, we're not going to forgive. We're just going to move on. You know, just forget and move on. If we're going to do that, then what we are doing is repressing what has happened, and those feelings, that pain gets plastered underneath. The person who doesn't forgive an incident but just merely forgets it is setting themselves up for similar events to occur. And all of those feelings of anger, betrayal, resentment, hurt become part of the individual's experience in an emotional turmoil. I'm going to share with you, be very vulnerable to you today, part of who I am, because the reason I've set this room up, this Conversations with Damien, is because in it there are tapes and there are videos of talks that I've given that are here to help you to be the best version of yourself. They are here to help you be the best version of God on this planet. And God is love, and love and God is the same. It's like Jim and James. You may say James, you may say Jim, but it's the same. When you say love, it's God. When you say God, it's love. You can't have one aspect without the other on it. So many, many years ago, I was a young minister. And when I was 25 years old, I had my own TV show once a week. I had ministry headquarters in Miami Beach, Florida. My executive staff was ran by a wonderful Jewish lady named Jean Taub. She booked my meetings, she booked my hotel, she did the banking, she did everything. I didn't travel by private jet. I didn't have Rolls Royce. I didn't all the things that are very common in years since. But I did a healing ministry. Now, regardless of what you think of the laying on of hands of healing ministry, remember this: there would not be any fake if there wasn't a real. There has to be a real for there to be a fake. Now, one of my close people that I was close with at one time is Chad Michaels, who's known for doing Share all over the world. Chad is a wonderful entertainer. In fact, Chad started in a show that I had years and years ago. And while Chad looks like Cher, I mean, drop dead looks like Cher, Chad isn't Cher. But you have to look really close and be really close to know that the two are not the same. And the same is true in a spiritual sense. So when I was doing these healing ministries, I was booked for 3 years at a time. And I had just finished 4 weeks in the great Atlanta area, and I came to Oakland, California to be at a church. And as I was ministering there on a New Year's Eve, the service starts at 7, and the church by 5 o'clock was packed. Maybe they seated 400, they were packed. And as the week progressed, we had to move to the auditorium downtown because the crowds were so tremendous, as was what was happening in most of my meetings at the time. Now, at this time, I lived in a bubble. By that, I mean I ate, I slept, I prayed, and I ministered. And on Mondays, I taped my TV show. So I ate, slept, and that's what I did. And the routine would be that if I was at a church and they had put me in a hotel and I wasn't in a small church where I slept in a Sunday school room, that I would get up and get dressed and do my own prayer and stuff in the morning and have lunch with the pastor, hosting pastor. And by 1 o'clock, I had to be back at the hotel. From 1 until 6, I continually prayed and asked God and begged God to be in the service that night. Now, in those days, I didn't understand quantum physics. I didn't understand about vibration. I didn't understand about energy. In my bubble, all I knew is that as I prayed, and I fasted sometimes, and I asked God to be in the service, that when the car picked me up at the hotel at 7, and I walked on the platform at 8 o'clock, that miracles began to happen. People began to be healed of physical ailments. The Holy Spirit was present. That's all I knew. So in this particular setting, one night I had a dream, and the words in this dream that kept coming to me was immorality and money. So the next day when having lunch with the pastor, I said, I had a dream last night, and the words that kept coming to me were immorality and money. And Thursday of that week, the pastor closed the meeting abruptly. Sunday morning, he announced to his congregation that in the last days, ministers are going to have to get rid of their ministers because of being homosexual, etc., etc. Now, at that particular time in my life, to my knowledge, I had never had sex with men, women, or anything. My bubble did not include any kind of sex. And I had completely, from my being, forgotten about any sex that had happened to me as a child, as abused of a child. Now, on this forgiveness we're talking about today is not about forgiving things as a child, or not about self-forgiveness, it's about forgiving others. So he had made this statement, and when Monday came, I was called on the carpet by the denomination that I was a part of that time and dropped. In less than 24 hours, all of my bookings for the rest of the year had canceled. And by the second day, my ministry director in Miami Beach was closing down the ministry, our TV thing, everything. My life was over. I went to a little town of 2,000 people, and for the next couple of years lived with my grandma. And grandma said, stay sweet in your spirit, keep your mouth shut. Whatever people think, let them think. Those who know you don't need to know anything. Those who don't only want to add fuel to the fire. I moved on. And eventually I moved to another state, changed my name, changed my life. I had moved on, okay? And that's a key point to do here. So moving forward, years later, I'm living in San Diego. And some of you know me from San Diego. You know that there is a restaurant called Damien's Fifth Avenue. I was the Damien of Fifth Avenue. Yes, I was there for approximately 2 weeks. I opened that with a former love interest who was a man at the time. Well, he probably still is a man at the time. And when we opened it, it was supposed to be 50-50. I put $200,000 in. He put about $800,000 in, lived in a different state. It's supposed to be a business venture. So as we opened and the crowds were coming and it was a great place, he said to me the end of the first week, because I had a boyfriend at the time, because this man was no longer a love interest. He said, you can either have your boyfriend or your $1 million nightclub with your name up in lights. And I said, I'm going to take the boyfriend because I can have a nightclub anytime and I can't be loved by somebody. He said, the person's going to drop you. You're not going to have anything. And he said, I will destroy you. Ended up that he had 50% of the corporation. His wife had 1%. I had 49%. I was out in the street. I would go to clubs to hear friends of mine sing, and people would say, do you know Damien? They go, oh, you're. My name was put all over the newspapers, had a field day with Damien's Fifth Avenue, and the gay newspapers even had a bigger field day of it. But you see, I moved on. And I went to Europe to live. And then I came back. And then later, I'm an entertainer. And I entertained with Kenny Kerr, fabulous Kenny Kerr, the incredible Jim Bailey, who else? Joan Rivers. The list goes on. And in Palm Springs, had a co-host in the show I was doing, the fabulous, incredible Tommy Rose, which is one of the most incredible entertainers I've ever worked with in my life. And then later, I took a couple years and I was overseas and I was entertaining, but my manager, my agent, who was my best friend, was controlling everything. We had joint account, joint house, name on the house, joint on my account on the Jaguar. So I had told her while I was actually in Sumatra when the tsunami hit, and I had told her, I said, when I come back, I said, feel like God, the godness is going to be taking me to a different level. And while I was gone, she had bankrupted me, left me with no money to the tune of around $800,000. I arrived back in the States with my Louis Vuitton luggage. I couldn't get money out of my checking account because that checking account was closed. There was nothing. I ended up on the streets, homeless. Ended up pawning my Louis Vuitton luggage and what clothes I could carry. They were in a plastic bag. Ended up sleeping in the doorways, asking, why is this happening? I'm 55 years old. And the thought came to me at that time, and you can get a tape in this room, the Earth School, that all this is just the Earth School, and there are 3 courses: love, acceptance, forgiveness. And then those courses are many classes that we take. And I began to learn that during that time. And there is a saying, a line from A Course in Miracles that says, let forgiveness show you what to do. And I wanted to walk in forgiveness. I didn't know how, because you see, before those experiences, I had just simply moved on, forget and moved on. And I stopped and I said, forgiveness, I don't know how to do this. I need to know what to do. So while I'm on the street, I'm collecting pop bottles and I'm collecting cans, I'm collecting aluminum things, and I'm putting them at the place where you can recycle so I get money from them, and it's going to be Christmas time shortly. So I collected enough so I could get 2 tickets to a Circus du Soleil show that my manager liked in Las Vegas. And shortly before Christmas, I'm still living on the street. I had purchased the tickets. I took 2 buses, took a train, took another bus, and walked a mile to her house. Arrived on the doorsteps. She answered, and I walked into her marbled entryway of her 6-bedroom home. And I handed her the envelope as she turned white as a sheet. And I said, these are for you. These are for you. And as she opened it, she said, well, when are we going? I said, we're not going. I said, these are for you. And at that, I turned and I walked away and I walked out. And as I walked out, it was like 100 pounds lifted off of my shoulders. I walked back to the mile or so to the bus I was going to take, to the train, and I sang and I danced and I was free. There was such a freedom inside me. The way to peace is forgiveness. And gradually I rebuilt my life in LA, and the gay marriage came, and I got married in that type of thing, and I wanted my partner to like the same things I do, and church was very important to me. He didn't like going to church, but he went with me. A side here to you is, if you're going out with somebody, make sure you have the same things in common. Make sure at least they're amicable to doing the same things with you. If not, then it's not going to work. Let it go. Move on from there. So I'm going to this church that is a affirming church. It was a church that was started by the Reverend Troy Perry many years ago, especially with the emphasis on gay people. And I sat there, and I sat there, and I sat there. And one Sunday, in the bulletin, it said, Fifth Sunday Sing. We're going to have a Fifth Sunday Sing on a Sunday night. Contact Reverend so-and-so if you want to be part of this. Now, they had the main reverends, and they had the paid staff, and then they had lay ministers. And this particular reverend was a lay minister. So I contacted her. And I actually sent her a clip from one of my CDs of gospel music. I told her, I said, I have appeared with Lawrence Welk. I was a soloist with Dr. Billy Graham. And I went down the list, not trying to be haughty, but by showing her that I had credibility is what I thought. But actually it was ego, which I didn't realize. So she contacted me back and she said, in essence, I'm not going to use you because I want to have people that understand the walk on Selma and what the walk on Selma is all about. And I let it go. And I went to the Sunday night meeting to hear the concert. And if they didn't bring in somebody from another city that sang a song that I had recorded with the guy that wrote the song, girl, I could not let it go. I would not let it go. I could not forget and move on. I could not let it go. So I sat there, and the next Sunday in the church, Sunday morning, then the ushers usher you to the aisle, and you walk down the aisle, and the usher at the front directs you to the next minister that's going to be serving communion, because they have a bunch of ministers doing communion and the acolytes. If the next available one wasn't her, I didn't want to put on a show and act up and act out, so I did the communion, but I was seething. So the next Sunday came, and communion, and they weren't always at the same spot. But guess who the usher directed me to that time? You got it right. It was her. And this went on for a few weeks. My unforgiveness turned into resentment. I couldn't stand the sight of her. My husband heard about it day in and day out for days, weeks, and months. I couldn't stay sweet in my spirit, keep my mouth shut. I told my friends what a bitch I thought this woman was. The ugliness inside, the emotional experience, the emotional turmoil was eating me alive. Now you see, God, and I'm not talking about religious God, I'm talking about God the Creator, God that is source, God that is your higher power, whatever name you want to put on the divine, that God who is love and creates, love and creates, love and creates. That's what God does. People say, oh, I'm going to have a constructive criticism. There is no such thing. To construct is to build. To criticize is to tear down. So God, love, is always constructing ways to bring us to places, events, people, places that come into our life that are opportunities to remove the blocks from our life that keep us from knowing love. A Course in Miracles says that our job is not to seek love, but the Course says that our job is to remove barriers and blockages that keep us from knowing love and expressing and receiving love. So I have this opportunity each time we're doing the communion. So the next Saturday is going to be a time of a minister meeting for their denomination. And I thought, I want to go see what they're doing. So I had registered, and I'm not part of the denomination. And it's a big enough auditorium that I came and sat down, and some people from another church in another town were behind me, and I recognized them, said hi. The row's empty in front of me. Who do you think comes down, plops herself right in the row in front of me, right in the seat in front of me? Hello? Opportunity to forgive. Yeah, me, my bitterness. I was bitter then. I had moved from unforgiveness to resentment to bitterness to practically hatred. And we had to break into small groups and talk to one another. I don't remember where the woman said, I couldn't even hear. But I determined at that moment I was going to leave that church at the first opening. I wasn't going to stay for the lunch, wasn't going to the second half. And I was going to leave, and I wasn't going back to that church, and I wasn't going back to any church ever again, that I could just be me and God on the outside. I had had it. All of this under the iceberg of anger, betrayal, hurt that hadn't been dealt with in a forgiving manner, but I have just moved on, was there. So about a month later, a friend of mine, recording artist, entertainer, Adrian Christian, gave me a call, and he said, hey, he said, you know who Reverend Pat is, right? And I said, yeah. And he said, she's going to be the pastor of this a church in North Hollywood, small church called United Church of Christ Metropolitan Community Church, and her first Sunday is Sunday. I'd like us to go together and hear her. And I said, okay, and I didn't have a car at that time, and I had a habit of renting cars on the weekend to go to Santa Barbara, go to Palm Springs or something, because I could get them at a really good deal. So I went and picked them up, and the small little church maybe seats 100 people. We got there, we had to sit in the back. And the way the church was is there was a middle aisle, and Pat's program, her podium was in the front. The Reverend Pat Langlois was in the front, and we were sitting in the very back. I don't know what Pat said. I don't have a word. I don't have a clue what she said. But you know how you can wring a washcloth and the water drips out? That woman talked, and it was like a wave of love came over me. And I cried, and I cried, and I cried, and I cried, and I cried. All I could feel was this love coming from this woman. Out of every pore of her being, there was this divine manifestation of God, of love coming from her. And after the service, you shake hands with the person, you know how you do in church. And she said, hey, she said, would you consider coming and be one of our musical guests sometime? And I said, yes. She said, well, there's the guy that takes care of all that. There's our music director over there. Go right now and pick a date with him. So I did, and I've been there a few times to be their musical guest. But the next weekend, I didn't rent a car. I took a bus. I didn't take a bus. I took a train, and I walked about 3/4 of the mile from the train to her church and sat there and listened to her. It wasn't a big group like the before. I don't know what she said, but that wave just came over me, and I sat there and I cried and I cried and I cried and I cried. And the next week, the same thing. I cried and I cried. The tears ran down my face. There was this love that was coming in. Now, lest you get a misunderstanding here, I'd had lunch with Pat at the time. I know her humanity. but I also see the goddess in her. I know her humanity, but I see the goddess in her. Do you know, we go to 12-step programs and we're hurt. And we go to church and we're hurt. And we join groups and we're hurt. And somehow we expect the hurt folks to reach out to us. Well, that's not what hurt folks do. You know, in the 12-step programs, if you're cute, you get a phone list. If they don't think you're so cute, they give you a big book to read. And there's a thing in the 12-step program that says, if you want what we want, then you're in the right place. Can I be honest with you? Most of the time in the gay 12-step programs I've been in, I don't want what you want. I don't see anything there that I want. I'm already sober. I don't see anything besides bitchy queens sometimes that like to gossip about each other's relapsing. Now, saying that to say this, in Palm Springs, there's a man that I respect, that inspires me. And he goes to the 12-step meetings, and just recently I was able to actually message him about this, because I can't do it private, his name, because that's an anonymous type of thing. And this man, even when he makes mistakes, I see divine love, God flowing in and out of him. So what am I saying to you this? Colossians 3:13 says this, forbearing one another and forgiving one another, if any man have a quarrel against any, even as Christ forgave you, so also do ye forgive. That forgiving is that you pick somebody up at your own expense. You put them on your shoulders and you carry them until they could walk again. You carry them emotionally without judging. You should have, you could have, maybe you would have. No. You simply shut your mouth and carry them and show them divine love. Because, what did I say? There is no love without forgiveness, and there is no forgiveness without love. And sometimes you can't do it by yourself. Somebody has to come and love you. We always say, love the devil out of you until you can do it yourself. So, in this, what am I saying? I'm saying, I cried, I screamed, I pouted, I stomped my feet, I acted up, I've acted out. But in the end, I've learned to forgive everyone for everything, including myself. And in the process, I've discovered the extraordinary. I've discovered peace. Peace. Do you know, forgiving is the process of healing, where forgetting is the process of repressing one's emotion. And in life, first we think, then we feel, and finally we hold that energy in our body of what we're feeling. Forgiving clears the blockages that keep us from knowing, giving, and receiving love in our life. The only true way to create a more loving, productive, and fulfilling life is by forgiving the past, not forgetting and moving on. Releasing the past restores us to a full energy of this present moment, a present moment of peace. Whew. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., I do a Monday meditation, 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. And tomorrow's meditation is about forgiving yourself. Hope you tune in for that. Next week I'll be giving another talk. Same time. open yourself up to forgiveness today. Can you just follow me in this little prayer in closing? God of many names, God of many names, of love, Allah, Jehovah, higher power, supreme being, higher intelligence, whatever the name, God of many names. Create in me, create in me, create in me a new heart. And renew a right spirit within me. Right now in this moment, as we just breathe in. Let a right spirit be renewed within us. And as I close every talk with this, remember, kindness. Kindness is the language the deaf can hear. Kindness is the language the blind can see. Be kind to yourself and be kind to one another. Check out the videos and the teachings in this room on Conversations with Damien. And I'll see you next week. If you can't be near of anybody that you feel that love from, tune in with me, because you know what? I'm gonna love you until you can be strong enough to love yourself.